A promise kept, a story of brotherhood and justice. The polished oak doors of Willow Grove Funeral Home loomed before Henry Thompson, his marine dress blues pristine despite 50 years of careful preservation. At 72, his hands trembled slightly, not from age but from the weight of a promise he'd carried since the jungles of Vietnam. Inside his jacket pocket rested a small, folded American flag, entrusted to him by his brother-in-arms, Edward Lawson, with a dying wish to present it to Edward's daughter, Sarah, at his funeral. But as Henry stepped forward, the funeral director's cold voice cut through the humid South Carolina air. "You can't present military honors here," he said, eyes narrowing. "Not you." The words stung, a reminder of the barriers Henry had faced his entire life as a black man in America. Yet behind him, footsteps approached, deliberate, military, and unwavering. Someone was about to change everything. The story began in June 1968, deep in the sweltering jungles of Vietnam. Henry Thompson, a 20-year-old black Marine from Savannah, Georgia, crouched beside Edward Lawson, a white Marine from a wealthy Philadelphia family. Their friendship had sparked during basic training when Edward stepped in to stop a group of white recruits from harassing Henry in the barracks. From that moment, they were brothers, bound by a loyalty that defied the racial divides of the era. In the chaos of an ambush, Edward threw himself in front of enemy fire to save Henry, taking multiple bullets to the chest. Bleeding out, he pressed a small flag into Henry's hands. "Promise me, Henry," he gasped. "Give this to my daughter, Sarah, when I'm gone." Marines have no color, only courage. Henry swore he would, believing Edward died in his arms. Unbeknownst to him, Edward survived, evacuated in the chaos, and their paths wouldn't cross again for half a century. Henry faced relentless racism in the Marines, denied promotions, assigned deadly missions, and targeted with slurs. Edward stood by him, once slicing his palm and pressing it against Henry's in a blood oath. Brothers forever. But after the war, systemic barriers kept them apart. Henry's attempt to visit Edward's family in Philadelphia was met with a curt dismissal at their gated estate. No colored visitors. He returned to Savannah, working 30 years as a postal clerk, raising his daughter, Lorraine, alone after his wife's death. Discrimination followed him, overlooked for promotions, called boy, well into his 50s. Yet he kept Edward's flag preserved, a symbol of a vow unbroken. In 2018, Henry's world shifted. Scanning the Savannah Morning News, he found Edward's obituary. Edward Lawson, 73, decorated veteran and retired executive, had died in his upscale Willow Grove estate, survived by his daughter, Sarah Lawson Bennett. The funeral was set for Friday at Willow Grove Memorial Gardens, an exclusive cemetery 60 miles away. Henry's heart raced. Edward had lived all these years, and now Henry had one last chance to keep his promise. Despite Lorraine's protests, "Daddy, your heart can't handle this," Henry donned his dress blues, packed Edward's letters, and boarded a bus to Willow Grove. At the cemetery's wrought iron gates, Henry faced the familiar sting of exclusion. A young attendant directed him to the service entrance, assuming he was staff. The funeral director, Charles Wentworth, dismissed Henry's military ID and Edward's letters, which explicitly named Henry as the flag presenter. "The Lawson family prefers professional pallbearers," Wentworth said, his tone laced with condescension. "You can sit in the back, provided you don't disrupt." Security guards escorted Henry through a side door, their presence a silent threat. Whispers followed him, staff mocking his audacity to act like he belongs. Seated alone in the chapel's last row, Henry watched Edward's flag-draped casket, surrounded by floral arrangements costing more than his monthly pension. The irony was bitter. Edward, who preached that Marines had no color, was being laid to rest in a segregated space. As mourners filed out for the graveside service, Henry stayed, determined to find Sarah. He missed the last bus and spent the night on a cemetery bench, the flag pressed against his chest. His heart condition flared, but he refused to leave. At dawn, a young Marine in dress blues approached Corporal David Carter, biracial, with a purposeful stride. Henry shared his story, and David's eyes hardened with recognition. "I've faced this too, sir," he said. "Not as bad as your generation, but enough to know it's not gone. Let me help." Together, they planned to approach Sarah at the memorial reception. Inside the funeral home's grand hall, David used his official status to navigate the staff while Henry waited in a side room. David returned with Edward's military records, confirming Henry's role in saving Edward's life. But Wentworth interrupted, furious. "This area is for family only," he snapped, threatening to call the police. David stood firm. Military protocol respects the deceased's wishes. Henry has proof of Edward's request. Wentworth's voice dropped to a hiss. The Lawson family expects certain standards. The confrontation paused as guests arrived, but the tension simmered. At the reception, Henry and David approached Sarah, a poised woman in her 50s with Edward's blue eyes. Henry handed her a letter from 1968, where Edward called him his guardian angel. Sarah's hands shook as she read. "Uncle Henry," she whispered, "Daddy told me about you my whole life. He said you were the bravest man he knew." She revealed Edward had searched for Henry for years, thwarted by barriers she hadn't understood until now. When Henry explained Wentworth's refusal, Sarah's face darkened. "Who stopped you?" she demanded. Sarah confronted Wentworth publicly, her voice cutting through the room. "Did you prevent Henry Thompson from presenting the flag as my father wished?" Wentworth stammered about protocols, but Sarah pressed. "What do you mean by standards?" The room grew silent, the word black, unspoken but heavy. Edward's brother, George Lawson, intervened, scolding Sarah for making a scene. His words dripped with disdain. "Your father understood propriety after the war. Some things aren't done in our circles." Sarah's response was fierce. Daddy would be appalled. He called Henry his brother. Sarah ordered a new flag ceremony, with Henry presenting. Wentworth resisted, citing irregularities, while George warned of the family's reputation. As chairs were rearranged, Henry's chest tightened, his heart condition worsening. Just as he stepped toward the podium, flag in hand, 2 security guards blocked him. Wentworth announced, "Military honors require authorized personnel. Mr. Thompson is not certified." A guard snatched the flag from Henry's hands. The room spun as Henry's heart seized, pain radiating down his arm. David acted swiftly, stepping forward with a commanding presence. "Attention," he called, silencing the room. "I cannot allow this ceremony to continue under pretenses." Edward Lawson entrusted Henry Thompson with a sacred duty. "This obstruction is not about protocol, it's about the color of Henry's skin." He turned to the other Marines. "Will you honor our fallen brother's true wishes?" One by one, they joined David, defying Wentworth. David retrieved the flag and presented it to Henry. "Fulfill your promise, sir." Henry, barely conscious, gripped David's arm. "Help me up." Against paramedics' objections, he sat up, supported by David and Sarah. With trembling hands, he extended the flag to Sarah. 50 years ago, your father gave me this flag and asked me to present it to you. He said Marines have no color, only courage." Sarah accepted it, tears streaming. "Thank you for keeping your promise." Henry collapsed. The flag passed, his vow fulfilled. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital as Sarah's cry echoed. In the hospital, Henry awoke to Lorraine, Sarah, and David. Sarah shared Edward's journal, revealing his decades-long search for Henry, blocked by intercepted letters and George's interference. An attorney, Michael Harris, uncovered George's deliberate sabotage, hiding correspondence and derailing Edward's plans to integrate Henry into Willow Grove, driven by racism and greed over inheritance. Edward had bought land for Henry, intending them to be neighbors, but George buried the paperwork. The story exploded nationally, exposing Willow Grove's discriminatory history. Veterans rallied for Henry, and Wentworth's funeral home faced boycotts, eventually sold to a foundation Henry would later lead. George retreated in disgrace. 3 weeks later, at Arlington National Cemetery, Henry, still frail, presented the flag to Sarah again, this time with full honors. Michael revealed Edward's final gift, 50 acres and a trust fund for the Unity Veterans Foundation, with Henry as chairman. The land, once a symbol of exclusion, would house veterans of all races. Henry addressed the crowd. 50 years ago, I promised Edward we'd tear down walls of prejudice. Today, we start building bridges. The foundation thrived, transforming Willow Grove into a community of inclusion. Henry, Sarah, and Lorraine worked together, honoring Edward's vision. On the day the first families moved in, Henry stood with Sarah, watching children play on lawns once barred to them. Edward's smiling somewhere, he said. Promises fulfilled. This story of a promise kept against impossible odds challenges us to confront injustice in our own lives. Have you witnessed discrimination masked as tradition, or seen someone stand against it at personal cost? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe bold action, like David's, is the best way to fight systemic wrongs, or should change come quietly within the system? Your perspective matters. Like and share this story to inspire others. And let's keep the conversation going about courage, brotherhood, and justice.